You know, I like myself a good action RPG, and we've covered quite a few of them on this channel. Star Ocean 2, Kingdom Hearts, Final Fantasy 16, Tales of Arise, Tokyo Xanadu, all these and more. But one action RPG I've never actually played was the widely critically acclaimed game known as Scarlet Nexus. The game certainly looked interesting, but I didn't have much of a major interest in putting it on my radar until a few of my friends convinced me to stream it. And after playing both routes, I can see why people loved it so much, as this game is pure, unadulterated hype. And I'm gonna do what I can in a video to explain why. I'm Crimson Rosso, and this is my Scarlet Nexus review, so let's get into it. Okay, to kick things off, let's get into the pros of the game first by talking about one of the best parts of this game, and that is easily its graphics. Scarlet Nexus looks sexy as all hell. I've said it before, but I've always preferred it when a game chooses to focus on a unique art style rather than hyper-realism, even if I do enjoy games that use hyper-realistic graphics. I will always, and I mean always, be an art style guy more. And Scarlet Nexus nails its art very, very well. Several areas look great and are meticulously designed. Personal favorite was just the cities themselves. I'm a massive sucker for cool looking city areas. Plus it houses some of my favorite scenes and is home to one of my absolute favorite boss fights. But out of everything that looked great in this game, the best looking part of it all was easily the enemies. Scarlet Nexus has some of the most creative as fuck enemy designs I've ever seen. Plant monsters with legs, crocodiles that look like scrap metal amalgamations, giant horse dog things with faucets in places of heads, octopus floating cubes. There's so much. These designs just have this fucked up otherworldly feel to them that gives you not only just this chill down your spine and makes them insanely memorable, but haunts you at the thought of one of these things just crossing your path, which is something a lot of RPG enemies just aren't really able to do. Sorry, Dragon Quest, I love you, but you ain't scaring me anytime soon. But that also makes them oh so satisfying whenever you rip them apart in battle. And that leads me to talking about the single best part of Scarlet Nexus, and that is its gameplay. Scarlet Nexus combat is fucking amazing. It's probably some of the most fun I've had with an action RPG in a while. Probably even beating out the fun I had with Tales of Arise, another Bandai Namco title. So what makes it so fun? Well, for one, it controls insanely well, to the point where it rarely felt like any damage I took wasn't my fault, and more the result of just not paying any attention or failing to factor in an enemy attack. It was incredibly fair. The second was how you upgraded your combat repertoire. Scarlet Nexus starts off fairly simple: light and heavy attacks, chase down and aerial, and most importantly the psychokinesis attacks, which is probably one of my favorite parts of combat, as not only is it super fun to throw a rock or a piece of concrete at the enemy after finishing a combo, or you can find the special objects that, while taking longer to activate, lead to some crazy psycho super moves, and there are tons of them, from slamming rocks into others, beating them with street lights, turning chandeliers into pseudo Beyblades, controlling buses to run down enemies like it's fucking GTA, and then there's my personal favorite of them all. So I guess it really is hard to stop a train, eh guys? Wait, where did everyone go? Guys? Well, anyways. Yeah, the psychokinesis is a lot of fun. But both it and the normal combat are both improved upon thanks to the implementation of the brain gauge, a skill tree system that you accumulate points for by leveling up. There's stuff you would normally expect there: stat boost, increasing combo length, more psycho power. But then there's the more technical stuff like unlocking air dodges, recoveries to get you back into the combat faster, special attacks like charge strikes and aerial slams. Obtaining these in tandem with the stat and combo boosters makes the combat go from good to great, as by endgame, you feel like a nigh unstoppable badass that can handle any single problem coming your way. This combat also factors into another key aspect of it: the SAS gauge. Throughout most of the game, you are fighting alongside party members that have their own special powers, and by forming a link with them, you can use their abilities in battle, from pyrokinesis to duplication to invisibility. There's quite a few of them. These link powers are also used in tandem with your psychokinesis powers. An example is slamming an oil tank into another and then activating pyrokinesis that lets you set them on fire to give them a burn status effect. Or you can hit someone with a water tank and then use electrokinesis to shock and immobilize them. or you can combine 2 psychokinesis powers together to gain the psychokinesis field spell to cause heavy amounts of damage. And that's where this game shines the most. Mixing together every mechanic the game shows you can create a fantastic gameplay experience. You can even make these powers stronger through bond episodes with your party members. There's also the inclusion of 2 other powers. First is Brain Drive, a power boost that for a limited time grants you increased strength, faster attacks, and an EXP multiplier that grants you boosts the more stylish you execute enemies. And Brain Field, where you create an energy field that lets you run havoc on enemies at the cost of endangering your own life. For any manga fans watching this, it's basically a domain expansion from Jujutsu Kaisen with more risks to the body. They were cool, but I've got issues with them that I will get into later. For now, let's wrap up the gameplay and get into talking about story and characters, both of which were solid for the most part. I wouldn't say either aspect came close to being my favorite story or cast ever, but I did enjoy my time with them all. The story stars 2 protagonists, Yuito Sumeragi and Kasane Randall, each new junior members of the OSF, to which they both joined for their specific reasons. Kasane wanted to protect her younger sister Naomi, and Yuito wanted to join because he was inspired by the OSF at a young age. They each veer into their own directions once the main antagonist of the game, Major General Karin, declares revolution from Sueo and joins Seiron. And that's where the major split happens, as Yuito stays with Suo and Kasane goes to Seiron, with each side having their own interesting story reveals. In Yuito's story, you learn about how he was originally born with no powers, being known as a dud, and got his powers from interacting with the time-traveling Kasane. And in Kasane's route, you learn that the future had gone to complete and total hell as a result of Yuito being alive due to something known as the Kunat Gate. So the future version of himself tasks Kasane with killing him in order to stop the creation of it, which causes Kasane to start facing a moral dilemma, made even worse when she learns Naomi, who was turned into an other, is still alive and under Seiron watch, and is being used as a bargaining chip for Kasane's loyalty. Eventually, the 2 parties come together as they learn the true origin of the others being a form of particles that come from, get this, the moon. So basically, others are created through space moon STDs. Who would have thunk it? Anyway, 2 teams choose to team up to get rid of the threads that were created as a result of time travel powers, but learn that they need General Karin to erase the last one. You go and beat his ass in a really fucking awesome boss fight, and he decides to help. Kind of. See, while he does go and get rid of the thread, he does die to complete his original mission, which was altering time to save Alice, a woman he was in love with, and they had died. But while he does save her, he gets erased from history as a result. The group then celebrates, Yuito slowly realizes he's losing his powers, and Kasane makes a vow to go to the moon one day. And that's the end. It's a pretty short and easy to follow story that, while a bit on the predictable side outside of the crazy 3rd act reveals, works for what it is and is rather entertaining. Even if I do admit it does have some issues that I want to get into a bit later. And since we've wrapped up the pros, it's time we get into the cons of Scarlet Nexus. So let's do it. So I've been dropping a lot, and I mean a lot of praise on this game. So what exactly does Scarlet Nexus do wrong? Well, for starters, let me get into my major gripe with combat, and that is how Kasane plays. Scarlet Nexus actually has 2 different playstyles for each protagonist. Yuito utilizes a sword and is better suited for focusing on one enemy at a time, while Kasane uses these weird bird blade things? If you know what these actually are in the comments, can you let me know? I can't really figure them out, because I'm not really sure how to describe them. I know they mention it in game, but I just can't remember. But they're better for dealing with multiple enemies at once. So naturally, you would assume that Kasane would be better in normal mob encounters, while Yuito is suited for boss fights. But to be honest, I didn't really find Kasane fun to play as in, well, either. Her combos look cool, sure, but they also feel insanely sluggish and floaty, nothing like Yuito's more responsive feeling movement. It's at its worst in boss fights, sure, but the normal battles aren't much better, as even when you're utilizing every part of the combat, it never feels like it clicks to the snappy fun that it was playing as Yuito. Which is a shame, because I really wanted to like it. It's flashy and cool looking. Her combat was an acquired taste though. That taste just so happens to be Arby's. Honestly, that's my only major complaint with the game. My other issues are much more minor. First is how Brain Drive works. Now, I love the benefits of Brain Drive in battle. My issue with it, however, is that you cannot control when it activates. I've had moments where Brain Drive activated right at the end of a fight, and as a result, just had nothing to use it on until I hunted down a new clump of enemies, which cost me some time in the form. Kinda reminds me how in Final Fantasy IX I would trance only for the enemy to just die in the next attack, costing me the entire form, and forcing me to lose a power-up rather unfairly. It's not as bad as that, but I still struggle to understand why this is a thing in games, as it's always way more annoying than it is fun. And the other issue I had is the inability to control your party. A problem I've never really had with games. But my big question is, well, why do I even need to buy them equipment if I can't control them? I can't swap over to use them to fight, so why should I waste my money on them? They barely participate in combat as it is, so I felt no reason to waste cash on them. It's another minor issue, but it's one that just confused me the further I got into the game. Maybe they wanted to have multiple playable party members, but just didn't have the budget? Who really knows? I wasn't there. If there's a reason, let me know down below, because I am rather curious. Oh, and speaking of budget, we should talk about some of the still image cutscenes as well. Now, I've made it very clear I'm more of a gameplay over graphics guy multiple times, and that's true to this day, but even I can't help but point out how stale some of the still cutscenes were, and to be honest, at first it didn't really bother me. I'd even rather liked it, but as soon as I reached Kasane's story, I couldn't help but start, getting tired of looking at the static models with 2 or 3 different expressions. They remind me of the skits from Tales of Arise, and that's not a good thing. They're not ugly or anything, but they're not very interesting to look at. And that's all for stuff like graphics. So let me get into my story and character complaints with the final part of the con section. Like I said earlier, the story and characters were fine. None of it was terrible, but nothing was amazing. There were parts I liked, like Naomi becoming another and being forced to come to grips with it, Yuito standing up to his older brother in the wake of learning he's been behind this crazy conspiracy, Kasane forming a bond with her platoon and learning to trust them. They're definitely great moments, but for the most part I wasn't massively invested in the story. But there is one aspect that got on my nerves, and that's the game's third act, where you learn that Scarlet Nexus' third faction Togetsu are actually from the moon. Yeah, there are moon people in this game. Man, if I had a nickel for every time moon people are introduced into the plot at the third act of a game I've reviewed, I'd have 2 nickels. Which isn't a lot, but it is weird that it's happened twice. Sorry, I've wanted to make that joke in a video for a long while and I had to take the chance. Anyways, it's just out of left field and a lot to take in. In fact, I actually had one of my friends mention that when I was streaming the game on Twitch, the third act is somewhat similar to Tales of Arise in its second half, where this other party shows up out of near nowhere and drops a truckload of lore and shit on you. But after I've had some time to think on it, it's actually kind of insulting to Arise, because as much of a clusterfuck Arise's endgame is, at least she, has a conclusion, which isn't really something I can say about Scarlet Nexus, as the moon people who make up the Togetsu thief, alongside the introduction of the other particles, don't get conclusions, and are instead left as sequel bait in the hopes of a Scarlet Nexus 2. But that doesn't seem very likely to happen, as Bandai Namco seems to have more important things to do, like promoting the Elden Ring DLC, or giving Tales fans another reason to put a pipe bomb in their P.O. box. But seriously, were they just unable to figure out what to do with this third act reveal, so they just left it up to a sequel in hopes of buying more time? Did they plan to have the DLC introduced as a way to wrap things up? I don't know. Like before, I wasn't there, but I do know that it just sticks out the more I think about it, and only gets more and more on my nerves as it swirls around in this empty space I call a head. Other than that, those are all my cons, so let's get to my final thoughts. Scarlet Nexus was fun. Like, really fun. It may have had some issues in areas that get more noticeable the more you think about it, but it is still a fantastic action RPG that any fan of the genre should play. That's why my final rating for this game is one hype-filled 8 out of 10. Thank you all so much for watching. If you liked what you watched, make sure to like and subscribe down below, hit the bell for some notifications, and leave a comment down if you're up for a chat or just want to boost me in the algorithm. Have a lovely day, and I'll see you next time for more RPG content.